So he was a neurologist, but in order to actually cut into someone's skull, you have to be a brain surgeon, and he was not that. So he brought in James Watts, who was a neurosurgeon.
So they had some sort of rules. I mean, like
There
set
were
of
some
rules.
I know, I'm laughing at that as well because I'm like, he can do everything else, but the buck stops at you can't cut into someone's brain by yourself. I mean,
No.
you can be there and
Right.
eventually this becomes acceptable, but healthcare horrors. Murder. Well, welcome back to the Healthcare Horrors podcast, hosted by myself, Alicia Carosella, recruiter here at Atlas MedStaff, and Ashley Boyce.
That's me. I was going to say
specialist.
I was going to say veteran recruiter as well. Not veteran as in you've been doing this for like 30 years, but veteran as in you served in the Army.
Actual veteran.
Yeah,
that
actual veteran. So if you guys haven't seen her videos on YouTube and Facebook and all that fun stuff, check them out. She's got some crazy stories.
Just talk about Army stuff.
Yes.
And also here with us is
Producer Dolan, what's up, yo on the mic? I'm just kidding.
Way
Brand
to drag it
specialist
out.
really wanted that spotlight.
Well, we didn't introduce him last time, so I guess he can have some time to spit.
Get your
whatever
15
you were
minutes
doing.
of fame, Dolan.
Yeah. Dolan. So who are we talking about today, Alicia?
We are talking about Walter Jackson Freeman II. I feel like it's very important that we talk about these individuals by their full name, not to be confused with your Joe Schmo Walter Freeman off the street.
Tell me more.
Okay, so Walter Jackson Freeman II is an American neurologist. Well, he was. I'm pretty sure he's dead. We'll talk about his life and so some of his background. His father was an ear, nose, and throat doctor. The title of that was listed, and I knew I was never going to be able to pronounce it, so I left it out. And his maternal grandfather was a prominent surgeon. So you might think that, oh, naturally, Walter is going to become a doctor, but he actually didn't express any interest in becoming a physician until he received his bachelor's degree in 1916 from Yale University. He became a medical student at the University of Pennsylvania and earned his medical degree in 1920. Oh, yeah, he's definitely dead, guys. Looking at these dates, man, what a miracle that would be if he was still alive.
Good catch. Good catch.
Truthfully, you would think I did the research on this, you guys, like just not sticking in the brain.
I think it's safe to say he is deceased.
So Freeman was an intern in pathology, which is just the study of cause and effect of disease, basically, according again to like Britannica.com and Google.com. So anyways, he was an intern studying pathology at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. And then in 1923, he traveled to Europe to study neurology. After his neurology studies, he returned to the United States in 1924 and took a position as the director of laboratories at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, which was at the time a leading psychiatric institution in Washington, D.C.
Basically a warehouse full of these poor mental health patients. It was not a great place.
Yeah, people actually did not give a crap about mental health back then and just thought people were unhelpable, basically. So Freeman's initial perception of the hospital's patient wards, he said that they were marked in part by disgust and fear, which, of course, if you were a ward of that psychiatric hospital, like you would be very fearful.
Yeah.
And they probably didn't treat them very well or bathe them regularly. So I'm sure there was a lot of disgust and disgusting things going on.
Security probably wasn't that great. Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen.
They probably had one guy named Tom. And he just stood at the door. And
Damn it, Tom.
That's it. That was Tom's job. He was just the doorman. He wasn't really security. Dr. Walter Freeman, he described mental disorders and the fate of affected individuals as a social tragedy, and he believed that the disorders arose from organic causes such as abnormal neuronal function rather than from unconscious mental problems. So he's basically saying, like, there's just something wrong with your nervous system, and
In the 1940s, the brain was superficially understood. So we didn't understand it. We didn't understand the link between neurology and mental illness. We just thought, there's something wrong with your brain. There must be a defect, and it can be cured so easily.
I don't think anyone understood what the brain really did, at all. Then, in 1926, Walter Freeman began teaching in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Naval Medical School and at Georgetown University, which I just want to say, like, he's doing a lot of job hopping in a lot of different specialties, and he's getting a lot of, like, you just get the title of doctor and you can just do whatever you want. I'm just curious. Like, what other qualifications are there?
He was definitely wearing a lot of hats, and I think that's also because of his ego as well. Sure, he wanted to cure mental illness, but he also just wanted to be famous and leave behind a legacy of being a great doctor and all this.
Oh, he left stuff behind, but it was not a legacy of being a great physician.
Not at all.
Okay, so in 1931, he finally earned his PhD. And then he was appointed professor of neurology and chair of the neurology department at George Washington University. So he began experimenting with different therapies for mental illness. These included oxygen therapy, chemical treatments, and electroshock therapy.
Very unconventional procedures.
Yes.
Frowned upon.
Not great. Mm-hmm. Probably not things we would do to people today.
Nope.
After he was experimenting with those therapies, the possibility of surgical intervention presented itself in 1935. So now we can perform surgeries on people to help with their mental illnesses. Allegedly. Allegedly we can do this. So Dr. Walter Freeman learned of a frontal lobe ablation technique that had been used on chimpanzees, and the frontal lobe ablation is just a surgical removal of tissue. One of the animals in the study experienced reduced agitation upon making an incorrect choice during a memory task. So he thought this was a victory, but the other chimpanzee, he was more agitated when he made the wrong choice. So not really it was kind of a wash.
Yeah, it's like 50-50. Like, what's going to happen? It was all experimental.
I mean, he just took that one, outcome that went his way and was like, yep, we're doing it. This is the thing.
But this wasn't Freeman doing this on chimps. It was...
No, this is just somebody else was doing this, and he was observing the study and learned about the study. So then there was a Portuguese neurophysician named Antonio Igas Moniz and a Portuguese surgeon called Pedro Alameda Lima.
Good job.
I'm just winging it here.
I can't pronounce coronary. What the heck?
You can now.
I can now.
We taught you. So they modified a surgical technique for the prefrontal cortex in the frontal lobe and tested it out on a human subject. Also very unethical. So Moniz injected ethyl alcohol into holes that had been drilled into the patient's head in order to destroy areas of the tissue that they thought were causing the mental illness, which sounds like a whole lot of speculation. A lot of risk involved for not a lot of concrete facts. So this procedure became known as the prefrontal leucotomy. And in 1936, Dr. Freeman modified this technique with the help of a lovely man named James Watts, and he called this version of the operation the lobotomy.
What do you think, Dolan? How you doing over there?
I'm okay.
You're not a big fan of the gory stuff, huh?
No, but I mean, this is just, it's crazy that things back then were just, all right, let's try this out. Just from simply not knowing, just being naive to
Yeah.
what the brain is, how it works, what it does, and just having these theories that it's a tissue that's causing all of this mental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, your brain must have a defect, so let's get in there and try and cut it out.
Right. Like a
and-
physical defect.
Yeah, and you
Well-
won't be depressed anymore.
And it may have some sort of defect, but man, they're really just guessing at what it
true.
is. They have like no legitimate way of knowing
Right.
what on earth is happening inside anybody's brain at this point in time.
Yeah. So like you said, Freeman brought in James Watts, and let's talk about why he had to bring in Watts. So Walter Freeman II,
Walter Jackson Freeman the second.
that one. So he was a neurologist, but in order to actually cut into someone's skull, you have to be a brain surgeon, and he was not that. So he brought in James Watts, who was a neurosurgeon.
So they had some sort of rules. I mean, like
There
set
were
of
some
rules.
I know, I'm laughing at that as well because I'm like, he could do everything else, but the buck stops at you can't cut into someone's brain by yourself. I mean,
no.
you can be there and
Right.
eventually this becomes acceptable, but
Let's also talk about the procedure of their lobotomies. So they would lay a patient down and drill holes on either side of their skull, near the right and left frontal lobes. And then a long shaft instrument was inserted into these holes and, tapped into the brain. And that would sever the connecting tissue from the frontal lobe and the thalamus. So they took the leucotomies to the next step and completely severed this tissue, thinking that would do the trick. And there's a lot that goes on with your frontal lobes. It kind of controls how you react to things. And again, I am not a professional.
I have a question. Were
Yeah.
these patients unconscious?
So they were unconscious, but then they were like, let's experiment with them being awake and see how they react as we drill a hole into their head. And the further we drive this metal shaft into their brain, let's ask them questions and see
Okay, was
how
it
they react.
did they numb them somehow, or was this just like,
Dude, I don't know.
oh
I
my
would
God.
hope so.
You would think common sense. I mean, at some point they would have bonked their head on something, right? And so they know, okay, this causes pain. So they're like, oh, let's see what they do while we drill a hole into their head and see, how
Yeah.
they're feeling.
You know what's interesting is, the prefrontal cortex is actually responsible. This is the part of your brain you use when you're doing decision making. And so this is why a lot of the times, this part of your brain doesn't mature until you're 25, I think is what it is.
Oh.
And I think something's wrong with these two guys' prefrontal cortexes because they are making some very bad decisions here.
Yeah. One of their first lobotomies was Alice Hammett. It was September 4th, 1936. She was unconscious, I believe. I mean, I wasn't there. But this was before they started leaving people awake.
Is this happening voluntarily or involuntarily?
I mean, it was all people that had, some sort of mental illness or weren't happy, or, maybe they had schizophrenia, things like that, and they thought they could cure it. So she was one of the first subjects, and after the lobotomy, she was very calm, quiet, emotionless, had no personality left, and was childlike. Also, when you're in a lobotomy, that can leave you incontinent, so you can't control your bladder, but that goes away eventually, maybe. I wouldn't sign up for it.
Man, what a terrible surgery.
Yeah.
Like the outcomes here are not great.
One of their most botched lobotomies was actually the sister of future President John F. Kennedy. Her name was Rosemary. She was 23. She suffered mood swings. She had seizures. She was diagnosed with depression. And, being a political family, they didn't want to risk any sort of
That is so
scandal.
messed up.
Yeah, they didn't want to risk scandal. They didn't want it to hurt their reputation.
So selfish.
It definitely messed her up. This was in November 1941, and she left with the mental capacity of a toddler because they cut too deep into her brain.
So how is this any better for their reputation?
Right.
You just turned your sister into a toddler.
Yeah, she wasn't capable of taking care of herself, so she had to be looked after. So yeah, not better, not a good choice. So that was one of their most infamous botched lobotomies. But they kept going, you know.
Of course they kept going. But wait, there's more.
There's more. So 200 lobotomies they did by 1942, 63% success rate.
What
define
please.
success.
Please define success here for me, because
it eliminated their symptoms, but you know, then what symptoms did they gain, you know, or what personality did they lose?
all of it.
and
then they invented Xanax, and we don't have to do lobotomies anymore.
And that led to the downfall of Walter Freeman in the end. Xanax.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Walter Freeman, he was still kind of a part of St. Elizabeth. So there were still thousands of mental patients, you know, just at their grab, whoever they wanted. Basically, they're still experimenting too. You know, you don't know how it's going to go. By the end of World War II, there were a lot of soldiers returning home with mental illness as well. So that just added so many more patients, I guess, if you want to call them victims, would be better at their disposal. There was a budgeting problem with institutions. And so Freeman was thinking, well, how can we do this more efficiently and cheaper and even faster, even though it sounds like it was already pretty quick.
Oh, no, I know where this is going. Oh, this is bad news. Bad juju.
Mm-hmm. So, like, when you have surgery, one reason it can be expensive is the anesthesia, even though they were also experimenting with not knocking people out. So this new procedure that Freeman kind of came up with, instead of using James Watts to surgically drill into these people's heads, he decided to create the orbital lobotomy for lower costs, and it was quicker. If he wanted to knock out patients, he could shock them with an electric shock machine that he so conveniently had in his office.
So the orbital lobotomy is the ice pick lobotomy,
Yes,
right?
There we go. The famous ice pick lobotomy.
If you wanted to knock them out, I think honestly, if you put an ice pick to my eye, it would knock me out.
Maybe we can try it later.
Experimenting. A lot of really ethical things happening here at Atlas.
So yeah, if he wanted to knock his patients out, he could just give them a little shock in his office. You know, he started doing this in his office too, which is not sanitary. And Watts, when he first witnessed what Freeman was doing, he was not a fan. This is where Watts decided to draw the line.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Not that he was a great guy either, but like at least he's got some sound decision making. Like, hey, this is not where we're gonna go with this.
A little bit of a conscience, I guess. So there was an Italian psychiatrist, and I do not remember his name. I couldn't pronounce it. I couldn't figure out how to spell it.
What do you mean you don't speak Italian?
Oh, man. Not on the daily.
Let me down, girl.
But this Italian psychiatrist found out that the skull is very thin in the orbital cavity. So Freeman found that out, and that is, you know, above the eyeball or on the side of the eyeball. And he was in his kitchen one day and had an ice pick in there, and was like,
this does not sound good. He was just in his kitchen
one day. He was in his kitchen. It was like, oh, this ice pick could be the perfect size to fit in between an eyeball and a skull.
Terrifying.
So,
absolutely terrifying.
So that's where he got the ice pick from, his kitchen, and this procedure takes 10 minutes.
I'm literally just shocked right now. When you said in his kitchen, like, honestly, like, I don't know where I thought that he thought this up at, but like, it just definitely wasn't so casually his kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think it'd be like in an office, like going through his
Yeah.
past, I don't know, experiences doing this.
Yeah.
Well, I trust no doctors now. I just must say.
So yeah, Watts was like, dude, no, this isn't cool. I'm out. But that's what Freeman wanted anyway. So again, he had an ego and he wanted all the fame and fortune for himself. And he did what any celebrity would do. He went on tour doing ice pick lobotomies across the US and did dozens a day. And this is where people really started dying.
What a fun way to spread your terrible idea. We're
Right?
going on tour, boss.
And, so you have the ice pick like in your eye and you would use like a surgical hammer to do the tapping. But he
Oh my
wanted
God.
to be a showman. So he would use like a hammer or a big mallet instead.
So absolutely freaking unnecessary.
Yeah, he had quite the audience. So Maeve Ingebird in 1948 was one of his victims. She actually already had 2 lobotomies.
Why are we doing multiple lobotomies?
And she came back for a 3rd one.
Sorry, I'm still feeling things. I need to be a little more dead mentally.
Right. There were actually other people that had 2 lobotomies. If you wanted a 3rd, he would draw the line because that would look bad on your reputation.
Oh, so 3 lobotomies is where it's socially unacceptable?
But he decided to do a 3rd one on Maeve Ingebird, and
Poor Maeve.
that killed her. That took care of that.
Her tender little brain was like, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah.
This pounding with a hammer and an ice pick, man. I don't know why.
Oh, man.
This
So
incredibly soft tissue.
3rd time's a charm.
3rd time's the charm.
Honestly, maybe it's what she wanted.
Who knows?
Who knows? Truly. No, none of us. None of us know.
So many mental patients that were in the hospitals for months could be sent home just a few hours later after a lobotomy. He definitely worked up an audience and reporters. So when he was on this tour, he would like get a hold of newspapers and be like, hey, I'm coming. Do you want to do an interview? Like, this is how great I am. This is what I'm doing.
Can we sidebar on like how messed up it is? Like throughout history and society, like the things that people like are eager to sign up and like watch. They're like watching other people totally get maimed.
Yeah.
No matter the reason. Like in human society, it's just like, what? Maybe you all need lobotomies. I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Doctors were definitely disgusted by this, though. They knew this was too risky. He was doing this for the wrong reasons, and it was, even though he claimed it was the greatest thing to cure depression, addiction, and schizophrenia,
He was doing it for the gram.
he was receiving Christmas cards from his patients that thought this was so great.
Thank you. I feel nothing. I'm not mad when my kids scream.
Yeah, dude.
Or when they set things on fire because they're bad because I'm not watching them because I have no emotions.
Yeah. And then he was doing like dozens of these a day because you could just knock them out in 10 minutes. And
Are they paying
You're
him for
cured.
this?
I would assume so. Like, he's going on tour, man.
I'm just like wondering if like money was a motivator or if it was just for the clout.
Maybe both. But there was, of course, a downfall to the lobotomies by one little pill called
Xanax.
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 I don't
It's not
think
Xanax,
we're
guys.
we're not to Xanax yet.
Hasn't been invented.
Chlorpromazine was a psychiatric medication that was introduced to the field. It could restore balance of certain natural substances in the brain. It was also called Thorazine, and this was developed in the 50s. So
Do people still take that? I think they do.
I don't know, maybe. It could be one of the things on the market.
Is it also kind of like a sedative? Do you know?
I don't know.
I'm just wondering. You know, I just see all these
Yeah.
movies where they're just like passing out pills to these people. So I'm just like, I just assume everything that they give mental patients in a movie is a sedative.
Freeman started getting so desperate that he was like, you know what? I'm going to start doing lobotomies on kids. Because kids
All
have
right.
problems.
Excuse my language, but this guy.
So 12-year-old Howard Doley was apparently diagnosed with schizophrenia, but he was really just an active boy. Like, he didn't listen, but he was just
any
being
actual
a boy.
12-year-old has been diagnosed with
Yeah.
schizophrenia. I think that presents in your early 20s, especially if you're a
Mhm.
male. It does not present itself and rear its ugly head when you are 12.
Well, Freeman disagreed and looked at this as an opportunity to say, yes, you have schizophrenia.
Wow.
Let's give you a lobotomy. He did not die. Some other kids that he did this on did die. I don't know their ages or anything. Howard Doley is still alive. And they did an interview on him like years later. And it was just like, he's fine for the most part. Like, he can live on his own. He lived a normal life. But, you know, there's part of him that, quote, like, he says he feels like a freak. And he just wonders, like, that 10 minutes he was with Shipman, or not Shipman,
Haha.
Freeman.
Walter Freeman.
Oh, man. He just wonders, you know, what did Freeman take from him in those 10 minutes? You know, what would his life have been like if he wouldn't have had a lobotomy? And if his mom
So
wasn't just
sad.
okay with this.
I bet his mom just feels so bad.
Yeah.
Knowing what she knows now, because she was uneducated. She trusted a physician.
Yeah, I was gonna wonder, or I was gonna ask, like, if they had a good relationship growing up after that. I mean,
Yeah.
finding out everything later.
And kids' brains aren't developed fully, so it was really easy to mess up their brains.
100%.
Whatever might control hunger responses, and there's just so many things that could go even more wrong with kids. So let's move on to his final victim, Helen Whartonson. Mortensen. There we go. Mortensen.
I liked Whartonson better, but Mortensen, okay.
Helen Whartonson sounds like a witch.
I know, that's what it goes with our theme, our spooky theme.
Spooky. A blood vessel in her brain was clipped. Now, if he had been an actual brain surgeon, if a blood vessel gets clipped, this is something they can catch and they can fix. But he obviously couldn't. He didn't even know he did it. So she bled out from the brain.
I'm honestly
this was
surprised
also
this
her
is the
third
first time
lobotomy.
this happened.
Yeah, this was also her third.
Well, yeah, her brain is super damaged
Yeah.
at this point.
In 1967.
Is this how he gets caught? Well, caught. I mean, everybody's just like not giving a crap what he's doing anyway, but
he, you know, is actually never like served justice. He was
this
70.
angers me.
I know, man.
Deeply.
So he's 72 years old. He's still trying to hold on to this legacy. But in 1970, lobotomies do become illegal in many countries. Thank goodness. Not all countries, but most of them.
Well, this one for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
The
yeah.
one we live in, the United States.
Not here. He would try to even visit old patients to get their like testimonials of how great their lives have been since the lobotomy. And surprisingly enough, some people I think were still on his side, but maybe that's the ones that weren't brain damaged, you know?
I think he was bribing them.
Maybe.
I'm not buying it.
So 1972, he died from cancer.
Cancel.
Cancer.
He was
Cancel
canceled.
culture.
He was canceled.
My brain, you guys. Yeah, he had cancer and he died from complications during surgery. Not in the brain, but it's still kind of ironic that he died during a surgery.
That's what he
So
gets.
yeah, so he did die. He never got justice, but they're illegal now. So, you know, people learned from it, I guess, which is kind of an interesting perspective. Like, if he wasn't doing all of these messed up things, like, would we know as much as we do? He was doing research. I'm not at all on his side, though.
Yeah, I don't think anything positive came from this in my just my opinion. I don't think this was like a win in any way. I think we should I just don't think this was a win.
Mm-mm.
It's like a lot of the information we got coming out of like the Nazi doctors,
Right.
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like
exactly what I
where
was
we would have
thinking.
not known anything about it, but I feel like we were probably on course to find this stuff out, whether
More
or not
ethically.
lobotomies
Yeah.
were going to happen or never happened, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
We would have figured it out eventually, just maybe not as soon, but I don't know. I like playing devil's advocate and hearing like people's sides and what they think.
Do you know like what brought on the case for people to be like, hey, we should make this illegal? Like, do you know what prompted that at all? Why was he just allowed
Well, people were dying, right?
Yeah, people started dying. But yeah, what like initially, like what really brought on it becoming illegal, I'm not sure.
Well, just like why was he allowed to just keep doing it?
Mhm.
For so
Obviously, like
long.
there was, you know, legal stuff in the works, you know, to make it illegal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He's still just out here like taking ice picks to people's faces, like, what's up? It's just a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Again, but like private doctors and stuff, that was still pretty huge back then. So,
That's so scary.
yeah. Some doctors like had patients who they found out were victims of Freeman like 30 years prior or something. A lot of them, I guess, would have strokes and obviously some stuff wrong with them from having a lobotomy. But yeah, he was just blinded by fame and thought he could cure mental illness. You know, maybe his intentions.
I don't think he wanted to cure Jack Diddley.
I got a lot of my information from a podcast called Medical Murders and a website called samhs.org. There's kind of a cool book out that I did not read, but it sounds interesting because Freeman and Watts wrote it.
Oh boy.
Yeah. It came out in 1942 and it's called Psychosurgery in the Treatment of Mental Disorders and Intractable Pain. So if anyone wants maybe an interesting read, try and find that book. I think that would be interesting.
Whatever became of James Watts? Do we know?
I don't know. Like he said peace out to Freeman. And
I'd change my name. Straight up. Change my name.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to him.
maybe he redeemed himself. Maybe he was like,
How did he do that, Dolan?
He hasn't
I don't
cured
know.
cancer,
In what way?
so how?
yeah, true.
It's the
I
only
don't know.
acceptable thing.
He started a procedure called reverse lobotomies.
Stay tuned for next Saturday, and we will bring episode 3 of Healthcare Horrors to you.
Do we know what we're doing for episode 3? No. Which is going to be a mystery.
It's going to be a surprise.
That Walter Jackson Freeman II.
There
Don't
you
do
go.
anything he would do. Don't mess with
That's
ice
how
picks.
we're ending it. Don't play with ice picks.
Don't play with ice picks near people's faces. Don't try this at home, kids.
Thank you for listening to Healthcare Horrors, brought to you by Atlas MedStaff. Just a reminder, we are not healthcare professionals. We are just fans of true crime, talking about some of history's darkest moments in healthcare. Stay tuned, stay healthy, and stay safe.
Healthcare horrors. Murder.